Richard on England, he had a few King Richards, not all as interesting as this one, I can tell you. This Richard, he's the one they called Lionheart. Why Lionheart? Was he brave? Oh, a bit. More than a bit, actually. He was a ferocious warrior, a right terror on the battlefield, but he was also a king, and that, as they say, is where things get interesting. Imagine a king more at home in a suit of armour than in a palace. That's Richard the One for you. Spent more time away from England than in it. But when he was around, things happened. Big things. Wars won, legends made. He was a real medieval superstar. So, buckle up. We're off on a gallop through the life and times of Richard the Lionheart, a king who knew how to make history and headlines. Richard Plantagenet, born to be king, well, one of them anyway. See, his dad was Henry II, King of England, had a whole brood, Henry did. Richard was the third son, can you believe it? Not exactly first in line to the throne, but fate, as it often does, had other plans. Young Richard, he was a fiery one, even as a lad. Loved a good scrap, did our Richard. Bit of a rebel too, actually rebelled against his own father. Shocking, I know, but ambition, it does things to a prince. Anyway, long story short, older brothers kicked the bucket, Henry popped his clogs, and suddenly there's Richard, King of England, year of our Lord 1189. Quite a promotion, wouldn't you say? But being king, that's only part of the story. Now, what's a newly crowned king to do? Throw a party? Reform the legal system? Not Richard, he had bigger fish to fry. Holy fish, you might say. See, the Holy Land, Jerusalem, it was in a bit of a spot, controlled by the Saracens, you see. Saladin, their leader, not a bad chap, Saladin. For a Saracen, obviously. Richard, though, he was a devout one. Bit of a paradox, really. Devout Christian, but spent most of his life fighting. Anyway, he decided Jerusalem needed freeing, time for a crusade. Third one, to be precise. Packed his bags, gathered his army, and off he went. Left England to, well, pretty much run itself. Didn't exactly tell his mum he was going either. She wasn't best pleased, I can tell you. But off he sailed, our Lionheart, ready to take on the Saracens and make history in the Holy Land. Section 4. A warrior's mettle, battles and bravery. Richard in battle. Oh, a sight to behold. Fearless, ruthless, utterly ferocious. Think a whirlwind with a really big sword. The man was a brilliant military mind. Tactician, strategist, knew how to rally his troops. And fight? Could he fight? Acre, Arsuf, Jaffa, these are just a few of the places where Richard's name became legend. He fought like a man possessed, leading from the front, always in the thick of it. He even impressed Saladin, and that's saying something. They were quite the pair, you know, respectful enemies. Even exchanged gifts. Horses, mostly. Sadly, Jerusalem, he never quite managed to take it back, but he came close. And he left his mark on the Holy Land, that's for sure. They still talk about him, the Lionheart who roared across the desert sands. Section 5, Lionheart's quirks beyond the battlefield. Now, you can't be a legendary king without a few quirks, can you? Richard was full of them. For starters, he spoke French. His English, well, let's just say it needed work. Spent most of his life abroad, you see. England was just a place he popped into between crusades and conquests. And the man loved to sing. Bit of a patron of the arts, our Richard. Wrote poetry too, though between you and me, I've heard his voice was better suited to war cries than ballads. Then there's the matter of his, shall we say, unconventional love life. Rumours, whispers. Nothing concrete, of course. But let's just say Richard wasn't exactly a ladies' man, more of a, well, you can use your imagination. Section 6, Legacy and Stone and Song, remembering Richard the Lionheart. Died too young, as heroes often do. Shot by a stray arrow, if you can believe it. Not exactly a glorious end for a warrior king, but what a life he led. 10 years on the throne, and he crammed more into them than most monarchs manage in a lifetime. He was a man of contradictions, our Richard. Warrior and poet, crusader and king. He was ruthless, courageous, and a tad eccentric. But one thing's for sure, he was never ever boring. So the next time you hear the name Richard the Lionheart, remember this, he was more than just a king. He was a legend. A flawed, fascinating, utterly unforgettable legend. And his roar still echoes through the halls of history, reminding us all that sometimes truth really is stranger and far more entertaining than fiction.